You're ready for me.
We're ready for you. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I didn't realize that everyone was in. So welcome and thanks for being here. We're so excited to have everyone tonight. I first want to thank Dr. Barbara Velasquez and Erin Green. Dr. Velasquez is one of our Coalition on Race trustees, and Erin Green from the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice as our speakers tonight. And I want to thank the committee who's put this amazing two-event session together for us. Many of you who are here tonight know us and have participated in some of our events and discussions and conversations on race in the past, and we're thrilled to have you back. And you know that our mission is all about racial integration and inclusion with a focus on equity and equality for all. And many of you are new to us, and we are thrilled to have you here with us. We know that in the current climate, after all the violence that we've witnessed in various places across the country and some uncomfortable moments in our own community over time, violence against Black and Brown people, and in the face of overwhelming institutional racism that we witness or experience, our coalition, our trustees, our committee, Coffee House Discussions Committee definitely saw the need and heard from people in the community that we needed a local discussion on what it means to be an ally and how we can respond regularly as individuals. So nearly 200 people are here to do just that tonight. More than 200 people expressed an interest in learning and committed to being part of these two sessions. And that always gives me a hope that we can make change. So once again, I thank you so much for being here. And with that, I will turn it over to Program Director Audrey Rowe. If I did not introduce myself, I always forget that. I am Nancy Gagne, I'm the Executive Director. Audrey and I work so closely together, we often forget that the rest of the world doesn't know who we are. So now let me introduce wonderful Program Director Audrey Rowe.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and it's so exciting to see all of your faces for our Coffee House discussion. I'm going to give you an overview of what the evening's going to look like, and then I'll turn it over to my co-host, Tegan Culler. The two-part series that begins tonight and continues next Thursday has multiple objectives. First, our objective is to acknowledge and respond to the anger, frustration, and weariness that some are experiencing and others are witnessing for the glaring racist-related outcomes currently going on in our country. Secondly, we want to invoke the power of community and come together and stand together as we go through this period. And thirdly, we want to open up a path that can empower rather than paralyze. I think that's very important. So many of us have watched the news and have felt so helpless and hopeless. We want to give ourselves an opportunity to take some action, both individually and as a community. The experience that you and me and everyone around this monitor is about to undertake acknowledges that we have a choice about how we respond to what's going on in our world. Tonight, we begin with education and reflection. And for the next week, we'll continue with opportunities for action. Our agenda tonight will begin with Zoom tips because not everyone on this call has been using this particular vehicle frequently. So our guru, I like to call her, Tegan's going to step you through some basic tips. And then we're going to have presentations, one from our own Dr. Barbara Velasquez and the other from Erin Green. And then we're going to have breakout sessions and you'll receive some instructions there. You'll have an opportunity to talk in small groups, share your thoughts, feelings, questions, and go deeper. This week is all about reflecting and owning and understanding where you are on this journey to anti-racism. Then we're going to have a time where you can actually have your questions that you've put into the chat throughout the evening answered by our speakers, as many as time allows, and then questions that don't get answered online, we will be able to put onto our website. And then finally, we'll have our own chair of the board close the session and give you instructions. We deliberately decided that this needed to be a 2-week process. It really could be 2 months, quite honestly, because the journey never ends, which you will find out more about as we listen to Dr. Barbara Velasquez. Now I'm going to turn it over to my partner, Tegan, who's going to go over some tips with you.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're delighted to see so much interest and passion and compassion here in the virtual room. I know many of us have been spending an enormous part of the last 4 months on Zoom, but not everyone has. So we want to tell you a little bit about the feature set that you'll have available tonight. The first thing, and if I could ask Robert to just click one time, you'll see down in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, your mute button. We ask you to stay muted unless you're speaking, just because it gets a little distracting with lots and lots of background noise. So it seems like everybody is muted now. When we ask you to go ahead and speak in your breakout rooms, you'll be able to unmute yourself by clicking on that in the lower left-hand corner. If you're joining us from a phone or a tablet, it is going to look a little bit different. I think on iPhones, the information appears across the top, and in Androids, it may still be a little bit different, but the mute should be very visible. And Robert, if you'll click one more time, please, you'll see, and another time, please, you'll see that the video icon is next to the microphone icon along the bottom of your screen if you're joining us from a computer. We do ask, in order to facilitate the kind of community face-to-face experience we like to have in our meetings in the old world, that you put on your video so that we can see each other and really engage in a dialogue. So please do turn on your video, and don't worry, there'll be no judgment if your hair is in curlers or anything like that. We just want to see your beautiful faces. Robert, if you'll click 2 more times for us, please. The third feature that you may come in handy for you tonight is the chat feature. And if you click on that icon, you'll be able to reach out and communicate with the entire room. You can also chat with individual people. So if, for example, you find yourself experiencing some technical difficulties, you're welcome to send me a personal chat. You can even search for my name, which starts with TEG. And we will be asking you, after our wonderful speakers have presented, for you to chat in your questions to them so that we can collate them and compile them for our Q&A session after our breakout groups. And you can do that in the chat feature there. They can come directly to myself or to Audrey, or you can chat them to the entire room. Either way works. We will also be going into breakout rooms, and Audrey is going to tell you a little bit more about that. But our breakout rooms will be smaller groups for discussion. When that happens, you'll be in the room for about 35 to 40 minutes. With a small group, you will have a facilitator. And if anyone was not able to respond when we requested that you identify your race, I'd really appreciate if you could just send me a private chat now. You can also do it by hovering over my picture, and there will be an option to chat to just me, and send me your race so we can make sure that you're in the appropriate room for tonight's discussion. Okay, and if I could ask Robert to advance the slides, please. Thanks. So the basics I already mentioned. Please do mute yourself if you're not speaking, but when you're in your breakout rooms, please do feel free to unmute yourself by clicking on that microphone icon. To help us create a community feel, we'd really like, as I mentioned, to have you put your cameras on. You can reach out to me via chat if you have any sort of technical difficulties. I'll do my best to support you. And tonight you may have realized by some people get a little icon at the top of the screen, we are recording the plenary session, not the breakout rooms. By participating tonight, you give us your permission to record. The discussions, in order to create the safest space possible, will not be recorded, and we'll say more about that when we go into the breakout rooms. Okay, I think those are our basics. I'm going to turn things back over to Audrey. You're muted, Audrey. You're muted, Audrey.
There we go. Sorry. There we go. So we're starting on our journey, the journey to anti-racism. And to begin that journey, we're going to have some background shared by our own Dr. Barbara Velasquez. Dr. Velasquez earned her doctorate in clinical psychology from Seton Hall University in 1999 and is in private practice here in Maplewood. Barbara is a founder of several nonprofit organizations and programs, including the Spiritual Unity Network, the Task Force for Humanity Coalition, and the New Jersey Kindness Campaign, and is a co-founder of the Soma Against Hate Collective. As a student of metaphysics, she served as president of the Surah Theosophical Study Group. Her major passion, aside from her two dogs, is social justice, where she works tirelessly on multiple fronts. She currently serves on the Community Coalition Race Board of Trustees as co-chair of the Community Engagement Committee and is also on the Soma Action Executive Board, where she co-chairs the Racial Justice Committee. Barbara, if you'll start us on our journey.
To make sure I unmute myself. Oh, I just had somebody call me, say they can't get in, so I'm trying to get them. Hopefully they'll call you, Tegan. At any rate, good evening, everybody. I'll just pretend everybody is saying good evening back. Can we move forward, please? Okay, I'm going to conduct you on your journey to racism. And here you are standing on the mountaintop with your backpack, ready to take the first step on your journey. So next, please. All right, but before you take your journey, we're going to have a word about journeys. Normally, when we think about journeys, we think in terms of we're going to go through step 1, step 2, step 3, and then we're done. But that doesn't work that way when it comes to things like changing how we think, changing who we are, and more abstract concepts. So your journey is most likely going to be a circular one where you start here in the red area, and you might start first with self-education. You think you've educated yourself enough, and then you move forward up to the next stage of self-reflection. But you get over here and you say, wait a minute, there is something here I need to learn about myself, or learn about this issue that's giving me a hard time. I need to go back to self-reflection. Now, most people would think, oh no, this is a failure, I'm going back. But no, it's not. You're really at a higher turn of the spiral because you've done the work before. So you're looking at things from a higher level, a more advanced level than you were when you were originally in the initial stage. And then you might go up to stage 3 and then realize, oh no, I need to go back here and do some more self-reflection because I realize I have an issue I haven't dealt with. Okay, so it's not good or bad to be in any of these levels, whether it's the earlier level, because you may be new, brand new to it, and that's fine. And you've been at a higher level and you're kind of going through the earlier stages to kind of finesse what you've learned in the past. So I hope that made that clear. So when we talk about these journeys, we're not thinking in terms of, okay, I'm at level 2 and it's above level 1 and so forth. It's always going to be an ongoing process. So can we have the next screen? We're about to take our journey, but wait a minute, we still need to figure out what is the difference between allyship and anti-racism. We hear these terms all the time. Well, when I was actually looking these terms up on Google, I found that they're being used interchangeably at this point. However, I think I can see in the future that the trend is really toward anti-racism being more advanced form of dealing with racism versus allyship, which is going to take on a somewhat new definition. And from what I can tell, allyship is more like support. You put a sign out, you say to somebody, oh, I'm so sorry you had that experience, or you donate money. It's more like I'm supporting them. Okay, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but that's just not anti-racism. Anti-racism is more about us. We take action and we're working together. It's not so much about them versus us. We see the significance of what's happening to other people is the same as it's happening to us. So we take action, we speak, we go and work with people of color. We work and take classes, we study, it becomes a part of who we are. Um, Next screen, please. Okay, now we're ready to start our journey. First stage of the journey is self-education. Now, a lot of people believe that you're not racist unless you purposely or consciously act in racist ways. And that's one of the reasons why people get so upset if somebody calls them a racist, because they're thinking, oh, I'm a part of the Klan, you know. But what a lot of people do not realize is that racism is not about necessarily only about you and how you process race or what you believe. Like people say, talking about race brings disunity, or I don't see color. It's about the systemic fiber in which all of us are immersed in, that interacts and that we breathe every moment of every day, mostly because we're unaware of it. So we all are immensely affected by racism on an unconscious level. And it's the societal racism that is the main issue that needs to be addressed. Everybody being nice and kind to each other is good, but it doesn't destroy systemic racism. And that's what the ally or the anti-racist is dealing with, the societal level, and not necessarily only the individual level. The individual is worked on in order to be a better anti-racist. So you may also believe, okay, you also may be revisiting this stage from a different level. Can we go on? I think we can make these available to people. I have to kind of go through these a little bit more quickly than I'd like to, but we can make this available perhaps on the website so you can get a more detailed look at this. So you're at that stage and you find that you feel defensive or you're upset, but you want to be an ally, an anti-racist. So how do we move forward from that stage? We move forward from believing that, let's say, well, I'm not a racist because I didn't say or do something racist. We move forward by looking and listening to the lived experiences of people of color and compare those experiences to your own experiences. So here is like a little diagram of actually reading and learning about things that you may not have been aware that people of color deal with on a regular basis. And this may surprise you. It may surprise you and motivate you to take more action and move toward not just being an ally and putting up a sign, but move toward active work against racism. A lot of times, people feel as though this is their, the work of people of color. I'll give money and I will put a sign out, but it's their job to fix this problem. And that's not the case at all. Again, that's an anti-racist doesn't look in terms of them, they look at us. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to move to stage 2. Once we've decided that we're going to self-educate, now we have to self-reflect, because there are a lot of things that we learn that may cause, and this is for white people, I should say, cause white people to feel defensive. Well, that's not me, is it? You have to self-reflect, or to feel shame, embarrassment for what white people have put people of color through. You may think that it's, and here's the term BIPOC, which means Black, Indigenous, People of Color, and I'm going to be using BIPOC because it's much easier to say. So you may think that it's the role of BIPOC to combat racism, as I've said before. You might need to return to stage 2 if during the course of your self-reflection, you discover a lot of unconscious racism within yourself. So you also may feel stuck because there's so much that's happening in your mind, and you're trying to transition into something new, and you're learning new things all the time, and you don't know what I should do with all this information. Or you may feel that, well, can we go to the next screen? So how do we move forward from feeling stuck and to try to enhance the self-reflection process? Well, if you're feeling stuck, that means you're still, you're not moving. So the best way to get unstuck is to act. So you might find a way to do the work of anti-racism. This helps you to become unstuck. You may attend a training, participate in a protest, do something that will temporarily, if you decide you're going to join a protest, for instance, this may temporarily move you to the action stage. But you haven't finished your self-reflection, so you're really going to have to go back to the self-reflection stage. But this is to get you unstuck, just to get you moving, okay? And also you have to learn to tolerate. I don't know how many of you have ever been in therapy at all, but you have to tolerate these feelings, unpleasant feelings that you have, feelings of guilt or shame, instead of avoiding them, because you can't change what you don't acknowledge or what you are defended against. So this will help you to get through the stage of self-reflection by recognizing, okay, I feel guilty about this, or I've done this in the past. Rather than wallowing in the guilt, you do the self-reflection, so that will cause you to be able to overcome those events, those feelings. And possibly from the higher stage, you want to keep working to grow by addressing the deepest or last vestiges of bias, defensiveness, or shame. So you might go back to self-education, for instance. You may be at the next level and realize, oh, I have this little tiny piece of racism within me, and I need to go back and work on that. I need to self-reflect, I need to study, and then I need to come back a bigger and better anti-racist. Okay, next screen. Okay, the third stage is that of action. Okay, you're moving toward being an anti-racist. The previous stages, you were more of an ally. You were supporting them. But now you're beginning to move toward a sense of us. Okay, this sign says, I see you, I hear you, I stand with you. It's about as close to us as you can get without actually being us. So you're moving from ally to anti-racist. You join BIPOC in their anti-racist work on a range of levels. And you keep on working to be an anti-racist. You feel comfortable as a white person working with BIPOC against systems of oppression, and you work actively to be an anti-racist, as opposed to like, okay, today I will give money, but I'll forget about this until something else happens. You're doing this on a regular basis. This is part of who you are when you become an anti-racist. And the anti-racist embodies anti-racism. You take assertive action, including stepping up and interfering with racism while continuing to work on being an anti-racist, because the work never ends. And so, can I have the next screen? I bet you thought you were done when you reached stage 3. No, you're gonna move forward because you're never done. Working actively to become an anti-racist by returning to stages 1 and 2 if you need to. I can't read those little signs, but those are little stages in moving toward the direction of us. Okay, and even after embodying anti-racism, there's a recognition that growth is continual and that you'll need to revisit previous stages as needed. The gist of anti-racism is not only us versus them, but it is also a clear recognition that racism is systemic and is way, way beyond the individual, whether or not they think or feel or say something racist. It's about society. And we definitely need people from all races to eradicate racism at a societal level. And that's what the anti-racist is really looking at. Okay, so thank you for being so attentive. And I hope that this was clear enough. I had to rush through this a bit, but I think we could put this on the website. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you so much, Barbara. And the point that Barbara made so well is the fact that a journey, we all come into the journey at different points, but we're headed to the same destination and we move at different paces. And she's given you some things to think about how your journey might progress. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. When you get in your breakout groups, you'll also be very much aware that people are in different places on their journey. As you think about what Barbara shared with us to this point, now would be a good time if something came to mind that you'd like to have her answer. You can put it into your chat, or you can put it into the chat at any point during the evening, and we'll have questions taken at the end of the day. We're going to move now to our next speaker, and we've talked about the journey from the standpoint of the individual and beginning with education reflection. Now we're going to talk a little bit about anti-racism as it relates to New Jersey. What's been a bit of our history and our background on this journey, and what are some of the things going on now? To help us understand that better, we have Erin Green, who's a native of Orangeburg, South Carolina, and is a recent graduate of the University of South Carolina School of Law, where he earned his Bachelor's of Art degree in Public Relations in 2016. Following graduation, he received multiple law internships and in 2018 was the youngest facilitator for the biannual Southern Human Rights Organizers Conference in Atlanta, Georgia. Currently, Erin serves as Associate Counsel at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice in Newark, New Jersey. His work falls under their democracy and justice pillars and focuses primarily on voting rights and civic engagement. Most recently, he successfully testified before the New Jersey Assembly, resulting in passage of a bill that restores voting rights for 80,000 probation and parolee citizens in New Jersey. Quite an accomplishment, Erin. If you'll share more with us, thank you. First slide, please.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Really glad to be here. And on that point of restoring the right to vote, 83,000 people in Operation Parole, it came under our 1844 No More campaign. And my colleague, Ron Pierce, who could not vote for 30 years, he voted this week in the July primary for the first time in 30 years. And so we had so many people working on that movement, and we've had some success, and we're going to continue that movement forward so we can reach the 19,000 that are still disenfranchised. So I'm glad to be here tonight with you all. I have a few slides and a few things I want to share with you that we're working on at the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice that relates to the current moment now and how we can get involved. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I wanted to frame this presentation kind of on a historical perspective. I think for me, I'm always looking at the past because it provides a framework of how we move forward. And we have many different examples. And one of my people that I look to for inspiration, I still learn from Harriet Tubman. I was recently watching a documentary of hers, and she was called Moses because of her courageous efforts that she participated in during the era of slavery to free as many people as possible. One thing about her is that she had her freedom. She decided to go back into the valley to free as many people as possible. But during that time, I'm sure many of you know the Underground Railroad, which had places all across the country, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, many other states. And the importance of that is that you needed solidarity to make it happen. You needed people that were not enslaved to offer their homes, offer resources to help. And that's what took place. You had people that offered their homes, they offered clothes, shelter, guidance. You had churches that opened their doors. And specifically the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, I raised that because that actually put many strenuous penalties on people that would help Africans that were enslaved. Like, for example, if you were found helping on the Underground Railroad, you could be fined $1,000, which in that time was $31,000 in regards to the currency now. You could be incarcerated for 6 months. So there were strenuous policies put in place that were meant to deter people, but you still had people to freeing, and that abolitionist movement, especially the Underground Railroad, played a significant role and leading to the Emancipation Proclamation. So I wanted to kind of just highlight that, because we've had many times in our history where we needed solidarity between races, between class, to come together and help those that were suffering the most. So thank you. Next slide. So community over chaos, this is one of our recent initiatives. This is we actually have this on a flyer, and we also have it in our offices, community over chaos. This is a picture of Dr. King, and actually a few days before he was assassinated, he was in Newark pushing the Poor People's Campaign, which was a multiracial, multi-class movement that focused on the economic disparities in our country and how many people were suffering during that time. And he has this great quote where I just want to read some of it. We are now faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. This may well be mankind's last chance to choose between chaos and community. And that was, over 50 years ago. And I feel like that quote relates currently to what's going on now, right? We have the COVID-19 pandemic, which has been catastrophic across this country, and especially New Jersey. And we've seen the huge racial disparities in positive cases and deaths with COVID-19. But not just COVID-19, right? We have the virus of racism, we have the virus of capitalism, and we see how now across this country as well. We, with 26 million people that have decided to take to the streets and organize after the deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony McDade, and Maurice Gordon here in New Jersey. So we have seen community, right, during this time. Even though we have forces that are against this community, we've seen 26 million people. People have estimated that that's one of the largest, I think the largest demonstrations we've ever seen in this country, where in the midst of a pandemic, people are organizing and finding ways to stand up. And we're seeing some righteous reforms, things that we probably thought we'd never see across the country, how things are coming down, policies are being put in place, people are taking control of their communities in regards to how money is spent, and really focusing on the needs of the people. So we are seeing a historic moment that is going to continue, I believe, for quite some time until we see more drastic changes in our country. So we are in the midst of history. Next slide, please. So you said Black Lives Matter. Here are 10 things you can do in regards to racial justice. So I'm going to go through 10 things we at the Institute are working on, that we have compiled, so that we can give action items to people in the community who are looking, how can they get involved in New Jersey? What are the issues, and how can they go about addressing them? Thank you. Next slide. All right, so here are 3 first pillars in regards centering on transforming public safety, policing. I know that you've heard the terms defunding police, you've heard some of the terms abolish police. We're more so talking about transforming public safety, because I think that a lot of times people can kind of get lost in that language. What it is more so just transforming of how we view public safety in our communities. And why is that, right? If you look at the current structure, many times the public safety forces that we have in place respond to crime, respond to homelessness. But how do we solve these issues? How do we solve poverty? How do we solve homelessness? How do we solve these issues? And one of the things that we're seeing around the country is that people are looking at their city council and saying, oh, okay, we're spending $100 million or half our budget on policing. Why are we not spending that money on community programs? Why are we not spending that money addressing poverty, housing, homelessness, libraries, schools? And we're seeing how people are really looking, getting more involved and saying, wait, let's try to solve these issues. Because a lot of times when we see how in our criminal justice system, our courts, there's a certain class that is brought before the courts are incarcerated, and specifically is disproportionately Black and brown people that are brought before these systems. And these same communities face some of the most oppression. They don't have sometimes the amount of resources So we have these budgets. What are we going to do? So one thing that we're encouraging, yes, the slides can be shared. I'll definitely be sharing these. We encourage you to, urge your legislators, urge your city council, urge your mayor, to look at your city council budget and say, hey, how can we be investing more in our community to solve some of the issues, the reoccurring systems of oppression? Also, centering community voice in your police reform effort. I think that the community is being policed, so the community should have a say of what that looks like in the community. And you have the power. The Constitution in New Jersey says all political power rests with the people. And it's important for us to engage and be involved in the political process as much as possible, because there are being decisions made every day that impact our lives, right? It may be situations where we can't go to city council meetings, but how if we have a coalition and say we have one representative that can go to city council meetings each week, it can report back and see what's going on in our community, can report back on what's going on in the state legislature. And also the third thing, we're pushing to ban and criminalize chokeholds, right? We're looking at some of the ways we can, some of the harm, and what are some righteous reforms we can get involved with pushing. We see how New York has passed that bill, so we're urging the state legislature in New Jersey to pass that bill as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. Youth justice, invest in building up kids, not incarcerating them, right? So in New Jersey, a Black child is 21 times more likely than a white child to be incarcerated. That is the largest disparity in the United States of America. New Jersey spends $300,000 per child to incarcerate them. So we are at the Institute, we're pushing for the closure of all youth prisons. And that will be $100 million, instead of incarcerated, will be spent in the community, investing in community programs, investing in schooling. Some of the things I talked about: library programs, diversion programs, restorative justice programs, and also, advocating for development of community-based systems of care for our youth, right? There is no reason why we should be spending $300,000 per child to incarcerate them, and instead of spending that money on our youth and building them up, right? I think if we're spending that money on incarcerating them as the youth, we're going to continue to spend that money incarcerating them when they come adulthood. And we see how this system of mass incarceration in America, we have the largest prison populations in the world. 25% of the world's prison population is in America, right? We have a huge crisis, and the only way we're going to resolve it is that we take substantive action like this. So we have a bill currently that we pushed for about over a year, a Youth Justice Transformation Act. And I'll be sending some more information on how you can, send letters to your legislators and implore them to pass this legislation so that we can have a transformative bill to close all your prisons. And this could, start a trend not only for New Jersey, but across this country, right, of investing in our youth. Thank you. Next slide, please. Democracy and justice, right? This is my pillar. There's many things I work on a daily basis. Vote and be counted, right? Register to vote and host a candidates forum. So we have the general election coming up. We encourage you to register if you're not registered to vote, and host registration drives as well. We were fortunate to push for online voter registration, and we were able to get that bill passed with our cohort of organizations that we work with. And we're also pushing for same-day registration. Online voter registration is not going in place yet. It was supposed to be in place actually in a week, but due to COVID, it's been pushed back. So there'll be like a 6-week window for online voter registration before the deadline. But we're hoping to pass same-day registration. And what would that do? It will pretty much get rid of the 21-day deadline, so you can vote. You can actually register on the election day. Because the issue is that sometimes you have people that don't find out about elections to the week before. But since we have New Jersey, you can't register. We've run into that issue this time. The primary, people wanted to vote, but they could not because of the deadline. So we encourage you, please register, get people involved as much as you can. And also a candidate form. We have a candidate forms toolkit. We'll be revising it to fit the general election. What it'll be is just like this Zoom call. You can set up a Zoom call. You can find out the elections that are going on and invite the candidates on, so that you as a community can engage with these candidates, see what their policies are, but more importantly, what are the things that you want to see? And it can start pretty much a accountability plan for these candidates. Once they get in, you can say, hey, you have this candidates forum. You say you're going to do this. What are you going to do? Are you actually going to follow up on this? Because voting is not just a one-day action. It should be a process throughout the term, right? Where you hold them accountable. They got your vote. How are they going to deliver on your vote? What are they going to do through in that term? And then also, like I said, the Constitution says all political power rests with the people. So if there are things in your community, you should never feel discouraged about going to your elected officials and raising these issues. I see it all the time, and I've been fortunate to go to the State House many times on many days, and I see how political figures respond to pressure, right? They respond to people raising issues and lifting them voice. 7, be counted, take the census. The census is important. In New Jersey, many people may not know this, but in Newark and Jersey City, they're number 1 and number 2 for having the most amount of Black people living in hard to count areas. And this is a big issue because the census allows for $700 billion to be dispersed across the country based on your numbers. So for instance, if you have only 50% of the people being counted in a city, they'll only receive 50% of the resources that they need. And that is a huge crisis because, that money goes towards schooling, roads, youth programs. And if they're not receiving the funding, that's a huge issue. And it's only every 2 years. And also representation, right? It's based, the population for the census has a direct response to your congressional representation. I know in 2010, I believe New Jersey lost a seat in Congress based on the census numbers. So we encourage you to get as many people counted as possible. The deadline has been extended due to COVID, but it's important that, one thing I would implore you to do is if you have not taken the census, take it right after this Zoom webinar, and then also encourage 5 other people to take the census as well. Next slide, please. Perfect. This is my last slide. We'll finish up on this one. Economic justice, create opportunity, and repair harm. So COVID-19, there was a bill passed. We helped advocate for the state to publicly release COVID-19 data based on race, ethnicity, and gender. There's an issue with that, is that because the New Jersey does not necessarily follow that law. So sometimes there's even a 2-step process. You have to advocate that the law passed. You have to also advocate that the law is actually followed and implemented. And this is important to have this data to see the disparities, right? To see the disparities and how this virus has impacted communities, so that we can come up with policies to address those issues, right? I've done a lot of data. I do a lot of data work with COVID-19 every day, and I just see how drastic it has impacted New Jersey and communities, and a lot of it has to do with sometimes, the economic standing of people, right? People that have to work, they're essential workers. They have no choice but to go to work. And some people don't have their own car, so if they get on public transportation, they're exposed to the virus. So there are many things that we have to rethink as a state, as a community, to make sure that a lot of these ills that caused certain communities to be disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, that it never happens again, right? So we need this data. And number 9 and 10, advocating for your city to create guaranteed income program. So in New Jersey, we have one of the highest wealth disparities in the country. A white family has a median wealth of $352,000 compared to a Black family median wealth of $6,100. That's one of the highest disparities in the country. And how do we actually, and what can that be traced to, right? That can be traced to, we talk about 1619, the original kidnapping and continued exploitation of Black people that continues to this day. And how do we move forward, right? How do we actually focus on that gap? Well, guaranteed income, what that provides is a guaranteed income every month that will be paid to citizens, specifically under maybe you can do it, certain people are looking at, for instance, if you're making a certain amount of money, it'd be extra income that you receive throughout the month to help you, with anything, with bills or resources that you need. This is vastly important. And what's good is that there are 11 cities currently considering it. I know Newark, New Jersey is actually considering it right now. They released a report recently that details how they will implement a guaranteed income program. And guaranteed income is not a new idea. This is actually something that Dr. King and leaders during the civil rights movement actually pushed for because they saw the economic constraints of people, specifically during the Poor People's Campaign. So this has been a idea for over 50 years of America actually implementing a guaranteed income. It's finally catching steam now. And I hope that it's passed not only, hope in New Jersey, but across the country. So this is something that you could be advocating for in your city. Like Newark is seriously considering it. I hope all cities in New Jersey, but it's important for us to lift our voices and get involved, even though some of us may not need a guaranteed income, we may not qualify, but there are many people that do need it, right? Stand in solidarity with them to push forward. And lastly, advocating for legislation to pass reparations, right? We have a bill that we're pushing that would install a reparations task force, the first in the country, to implement a reparations task force looking at the harms of slavery and seeing how can we repair some of those harms. And it's vastly important because we've never really dealt with slavery in America, right? We've had programs, but we never actually dealt with the economic, the physical harm of it, and how it continues to this day. And now we see, even in America, we have some of the highest economic disparities since we've seen since the 1800s currently, right? Currently, we have people on pace to become trillionaires, right? There are discussions that Jeff Bezos may be a trillionaire. So we're seeing huge economic disparities. And the only way we're going to do this, right, is that when we look at oppression, slavery was by design, but the freedom, liberation has to be by design as well, right? So we have to be able to stand in solidarity and push these policies to make sure that people are given the resources that they need and that people, the things that they need are addressed. It's very important. I think people should have housing. People should have the income they need. People should have the resources. It shouldn't just be for a few people to be living well. I want everyone to have the opportunity in America. And these are some of the things that we can do. These are just a few things that we've worked on. But like I said, I'll send this information over to everyone so they can have it. I'll send the extended document. And I'm more than willing to talk through this as well. But also I'll send the bill numbers. What we have is easy setup where we send you a link, we put your name, and they'll send a letter for you to your legislator on your behalf. But thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm looking forward to more of the discussion.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was amazing. I want to remind you, I'm sure you've got many, many questions, but if there's some that are burning and you really would like a specific answer to, we invite you to put those questions into the chat, and then Tegan or one of us will be going through those questions throughout the balance while you're in your breakout rooms and trying to pull forth those questions that tend to have more traction for a number of you. Erin was a perfect follow-up for Barbara's formula on our journey to anti-racism. If you'll recall, she indicated that the first step is education. And I think we all got a great education, particularly as it relates to our own state. Often we get numbers and stats related to the nation, but we don't have an appreciation for what's happening right here in our own backyard. And you can't fix or address what you're not aware of. So we thank Erin for that very much. So education, then you need to reflect on what you've heard from Erin tonight and decide where you play into that picture. Where do you become a part of the plan, the design? Because we have to be just as intentional about dismantling racism as the institutions are that stand against us now. And so now I believe we're ready to move into our breakout groups. I need to give you a little instruction. So Robert, thank you. Before I go into the instruction, you probably noticed in your sign up that we're doing things a little bit differently this time. Tonight, we're introducing racial affinity groups for our breakouts. Typically, we work very hard to make our groups as mixed race as possible, and tonight we're doing just the opposite. But as usual, we're very intentional. We're doing it for a constructive reason. It's been found by a number of organizations who do a lot of conversations and community work that when you bring people of the same race and background together, it gives them an opportunity to talk about issues from their perspective without a sense of judgment. And then by joining and supporting and understanding, they can sometimes have new insight And then that gives them the foundation to then go into a more robust discussion in mixed race. So tonight we're going to do what we call the affinity grouping, where those of you who sent your race in, and hopefully that with Tegan's help, we've been able to capture all, if not most of those races, you will end up in a group of people who identify as the same race as you. And then, but you will have the same questions. And the intent is for you to get more comfortable, to be more candid. As Tegan mentioned earlier, there will be no cameras. What's said in the breakouts stays in the breakouts. There are no screenshots. So it's a safe space where you may get an opportunity to say some things that you may have been thinking and to hear what your neighbor who is similar to you might be thinking on that same issue. So it's an opportunity for us to grow and to move further down our journey to anti-racism. Looking at the rules for tonight, I think I've already mentioned, you'll have a facilitator or a moderator. So when we go into the break group mode, you'll instantly show up in your individual groups, and there will be someone in your group who identifies as your facilitator, and they will help you move through this process. You will have anywhere from 30 to 35 minutes to actually consider 2 questions that we put before you. However, we found in the past that many times when people are in these settings, they don't get a chance to talk about race that often. And so there may be other perspectives that come up as long as you stay within the guidelines of where we're trying to go. Right now, we're talking about educating and reflecting as we go on our journey to anti-racism. Then the facilitator will work with you to follow your questions. To address the questions you might introduce. After the group has had this 30 minutes, 35 minutes to talk, then we're then going to ask you as a group to decide what are some of the main trends that you saw in your discussion. Were there certain questions that tend to surface? Were there certain feelings? And then you're going to have your facilitator do in the readout a summary for your particular group. And you'll get a chance to kind of fact check with that person to see if they're capturing all the key ideas. When we come back together from the breakout groups, we'll all have the benefit of what you guys have shared and learned. And it's all about you also connecting with yourself on this journey and maybe stirring up some feelings that you did not have prior to this particular gathering tonight. So if we move on to the next slide, there are some virtual discussion ground rules. The first one is we use what we call a round robin or pass system. Everyone who is in your group will appear on the screen. So if your group has 10 people, those 10 faces will be the only ones that appear on your screen. Your facilitator will give each and every one of you an opportunity to weigh in on either the questions that's being raised. And after everybody's gone, what we call round robin, time permitting, she may decide to double around again. The option of passing is always a very valid one. If you're not at a point where you have kind of sat with the issue or not quite sure how you feel, it's perfectly honorable to pass. And then at the end of that session, your facilitator can come back to you and see if you'd like to say something. If the answer is no, that's fine as well. But remember, the whole value and power of the group is learning and sharing from each other. So to the extent that you're able and willing to share, you not only get a chance to experience what your articulation feels like, but other people out there get touched as well. We also ask you to speak for yourself. We don't think that there's a lot of value, or we know that there's very little value in talking about something that happened 4 persons removed, because then the person can't follow up with a question to basically understand what the gist of that whole experience was. So talk from your own firsthand experience. Be candid, but be respectful. And we also want everyone to understand that we come here from different backgrounds and perspectives, and we're not always going to agree. So let's agree to disagree, and that's okay. We're not trying to, in some way, install groupthink, but we do want thinking to occur, and hopefully for all of us to think at a deeper level on these issues than perhaps we did before. So that being said, I think we may be at a point, Tegan, where we're ready to actually go into our rooms. Are we there yet?
Sure. So thank you very much for those of you who have attended our virtual meetings before. You'll know that in our last meeting we had some breakout room challenges. We think we've resolved them, but we're rejiggering people a little bit because we have fewer people than we initially expected. That means more for our facilitators than anything else. There may be 2 facilitators in a room, and if there are, I encourage you to just choose one of you. So I'll be opening the rooms now. You'll automatically be sort of kidnapped for about 32 minutes into your rooms. As Audrey said, please do keep your cameras on and prepare to unmute yourself when it's time to speak. And if you don't go into a room right away, I'll be assigning you shortly. Okay, enjoy your discussion, everyone.
We will provide for you a link to the Google Drive where this document lives. We'll also provide that information on the coalition website if that's an easier place for you to go to receive it. Before we move on to our actual close and I hand it over to our chair of the board, I'd like to thank the Maplewood Library who so graciously provided this platform for us tonight to hold this large gathering. And I'd also like to really thank all of you. It's so impressive that we had 102 people join us and 91 of them stayed to this point. That says a lot about the level of commission. So I think we're off to a great start, but we can't get comfortable. There's always so much more to do and so much more to learn. Next week, we're going to be more into the action phase, and we're actually going to be presenting local opportunities, things that are going on that if you want to really act to get unstuck, as Barbara said, there are things you can do because you don't have to be perfect before you act. It's a parallel process. You get out and do what you can do at the same time that you're continuing to learn and you're continuing to reflect. So it's a very complex thing, and we encourage you all to embrace that. Let me now hand it over to Kelly Quirk, who is our fearless leader as chair of the Coalition's Board of Trustee, and let her close us out.
Thank you, Audrey. I don't know how much more I have to add to your great summary.
Sorry.
Nope, that's great. I want to just one more time thank the committee who put this together, and to thank Erin Green, Dr. Velasquez for your presentations. I also want to thank all the participants. I think it takes, you know, for a long time we talked about having safe spaces to have conversations. We need to have brave spaces to have conversations. Brave spaces means admitting when we make mistakes. And I know that everyone came here tonight and stayed with the intention of not just growing, but committing and really deepening that committing to anti-racist work. So I'm really excited for you to see you all back next week, because it's really important that we sustain sort of that energy and we put this together as that. So we'll see you there. We also have a Survey Monkey, and we really need you to fill it out because it gives us feedback on what was helpful about events, what wasn't helpful, what we can do more of, what we need to do more of next. And second, I want to thank everybody. You know, one big theme that came out is that the pandemic is a terrible situation, but it has created a lot of opportunity for us to bridge and talk in ways that we haven't normally. And so we should utilize that opportunity as much as we can. So here is your survey. Thank you all. I think, Audrey, can we click on this link? How does this work?
I don't think that we can
in the chat. The link is in the chat to the Survey Monkey.
Yes.
So
and we would like you, if you will, it only takes 3 minutes. And it's very important for us to know how well we're meeting your needs, particularly as we might be able to take some of your input and adapt it into our meeting next week. So what you think is very important to us, and we hope that you will take the time to give us the feedback. Particularly also would like to know what you thought about the affinity groups, because that's a new thing. And for some of you who've been with us for years, it's a different thing. So, you know, how that felt to you, and you really won't have the full appreciation perhaps until we meet next week and you can compare the two. So I want to thank the Coffee House discussion team. I'm looking at my screen, and I know that includes Brianna Spann, Jeremy Brodich, Barbara Velasquez, Judith Gaston, Catherine Cronin, Caroline Smith, and Erin Dope. Is there anyone I missed that's on the call? Thanks to all of you and the great work you've done, and more work to be done. Have a great night, guys, and we certainly want to see you next week.